If we can go ahead and get a seat, we'll start in just a few minutes. Well, good morning. Glad to see all these smiling faces here bright and early in Forsyth County. I just want to first thank Lauren, my fine vice chairman. We had a dinner for the committee last night and a bunch of folks after our first meeting yesterday, and it was great. And no, we did not jump in this pool at some point during the night, or not before I left. No pools, But I was thinking about it, and then it really hits me hard or very clearly when you see the folks in this room, how important this subject matter is. When Speaker Burns talked to me about it, and I talked to him way back in March, we knew that, we needed to talk about construction cost, and what we can do to make things better if there is anything. I tell the committee, this is the largest committee in the House, besides appropriations, which has everybody on it just about. And it's because we care. And Lauren made a good point last night. Of the 159 counties, everybody wants to be involved. And so we take it serious, and I work with the best people. I'm looking around the room at some of our friends that I've gotten to know in my years, and I've just enjoyed it a lot. I want to recognize our DOT board member, Joe Stein. Joe, raise your hand. We have appreciated Joe being our leader in this world up in this area, and Joe, you've done a great job in your last year. We sure appreciate what you've done. When Speaker Burns talked to Lauren and I Sunday afternoon after our caucus meeting, we talked about a lot of things, but he said just make sure, Rick and Lauren, you keep us on focus and see what we can do, and listen. And this committee that I've got with you before you today will do that. I've challenged them to, when you're speaking, when you get through, to ask questions and delve into the subject matter a lot. We know the demand for transportation is increasing. Depends on which way you came to the Forsyth Performing Arts Center. You came up 400, you came across 20. Any direction you came here, you came through road construction. And they've done a great job about planning and the years that go into doing all this, and we appreciate it. One of the fastest growing counties in the state. But the desire and need is everywhere, and that's what we enjoy. We've got a little change. I'll just kind of go over what we're going to do. First we're going to hear from Meg and Walt from GDOT, then Barron Worthington, who I got to know the other day from Vulcan's going to speak, then Jeff Newland with Ready Mix, and then Dan Garcia with the Highway Contractors, and then Joe Santora, who is our GTA guy, and I think you'll enjoy his presentation. At the end, Martin Marietta, the committee to Martin Marietta, take a tour of a quarry. I had the great opportunity 2 weeks ago to go to Vulcan's at Norcross. Wow, what an investment y'all are making up there, and it was good for us to see. Got to thank two people. Where's Lauren? Way in the back. This is live streamed. It's on our house media services, and this young lady in the back puts this together. That her team all across the state and 8 different study committees that are going across. So it'll be documented. It's online. But I just want to thank her for being here at 8 o'clock to getting that done. Also in the back we have our attorney, Jenna Doldy. She's about there beside her. She could come sit up here if she wants to. But who'll, because it's real important. We want them here because they need to know what we're talking about. Because when we go see them in January or December with a bill idea, that she can help us. And I always have to recognize my side and he does the envious job of trying to coordinate between Rick Jaspers and Lauren McDonald. And we appreciate her a lot. She's the one that keeps sending us texts. We need you to do this. Okay, what are we going to do here? Y'all got a schedule down? Who you talk to? You're great, and we appreciate what you do. Without further ado, Meg, we're so happy. Okay, Josh is going to start us off. Yep.
I sound much better with the mic off, though. On behalf of the department, I'd like to express our appreciation for this invitation to present today on this critical topic by sharing our data and analysis on the impact of inflation to GDOT's program and transportation projects. It is our hope that this presentation will provide this committee with a broad set of relevant data from multiple processes and multiple sources to assist the committee in its work. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters, GDOT's Chief Engineer, Meg Perkle, and our State Project Review Engineer, Walt Taylor. But before Meg comes up, I would also like to recognize, obviously Joe Stein, our board member, has already been recognized, but Patrick Allen, our Director of Construction, Jeremy Daniel, our State Construction Engineer, Josh Taylor, no relation to Walt, our Assistant State Project Review Engineer, and Catherine Park, also from the Office of Engineering Services. So we just appreciate everyone having us here today. The team's glad to be here, and with that, I'll turn it over to Meg.
Hey, well, Josh, while Meg's coming up, I jumped ahead of myself. You know, I know most of y'all in here, fortunately, but I don't know that you know all of our committee members. So we're going to start down here with Judd. I want you to, where these folks are from, you know, tell us a little bit about yourself, Judd, if you'll start us.
Thank you, Chairman. Judd Howard, represent District 71 out in West Georgia, which covers Carrollton, Villa Rica, and Temple.
Gary Richardson, represent District 125, which is part of Columbia County and McDuffie County, the cities of Grovetown and Harlem.
Holt Persinger, District 119, representing Barrow and Jackson counties.
Lauren McDonald, you're almost in the district that I represent. So close.
Don.
Okay. I'm Don Parsons. I represent part of North Cobb County and part of South Cherokee County, particularly Woodstock and House District 44.
I'm Vance Smith. I represent District 138, which is parts of Troup County, Harris County, my home county, and Muskogee, Columbus. Appreciate being with y'all.
Good morning. I am Marvin Lim. I am an unincorporated Norcross and Gwinnett. So right when DeKalb turns into Gwinnett, near Spaghetti Junction, all the way to Beaver Rowan Road, right before the Norcross Quarry of Vulcan Materials.
Thank you.
All right.
Madam, go ahead.
Thank you, and good morning. And while she's pulling up the slides, I'll go ahead and get started here. So as Josh mentioned, I'm going to discuss our experience with the impact of inflation on transportation project construction. Today, you'll primarily hear from me and Walt, but we've brought a whole host of experts with us, so hopefully we can answer any questions you may have at the end. So what we plan to do is walk through some important data points relating to transportation cost trends, how GDOT develops our estimates on our projects, and information about the cost of doing business. But before we get into those details, I want to take a quick look at the national view. So the commissioner used this chart in his budget hearing last January, so this might look a little familiar to some of y'all. This chart shows the National Highway Construction Cost Index, the NHCCI, and it's developed by the Federal Highway Administration using actual construction cost data from every state DOT. The NHCCI is a measure of the average change over time in the prices paid by state transportation departments for roadway construction. That's the red line shown on the chart, and it represents a 70% increase in highway construction costs since 2021. The Federal Highway Administration includes other important economic indices on this chart for comparison purposes. We're all familiar with the Consumer Price Index, which is the blue line and measures the average change in the prices paid by consumers for goods and services, generally a measure of overall inflation. And the Employment Cost Index is a quarterly economic indicator published by the Department of Labor Statistics that measures change in hourly cost of labor for businesses, and that's the yellow line. And the PPI is the green line. It's an economic indicator showing inflation and deflation in the production level for industries like mining, steel, and cement manufacturing, and acts as a leading indicator for future consumer prices. So compared to all these key economic indicators, you can see that the red line, the cost of transportation construction, is outpacing the other indices in a big way at the national level. So this is the national picture, but what does this mean for Georgia? Here's that same NHCCI index data with our regular state budget indexed to it as well. From 2020 to 2026, inflation increased 66% for construction costs. The GDOT state budget, which is essentially state motor fuel tax collections, increased by 36%. So you can see that the gas tax collections have lost much of their buying power since 2020. But GDOT's been very fortunate in the last 3 years in that this legislature and the governor have added to our budget with state general funds, and that's been a huge help. So here's the impact of investing the state general funds in the amended budgets over the last 3 years. You can see that with the additional state general fund in the amended budgets for FY '24, '25, and '26, we gained back a lot of the ground that we lost from 2021 to 2024.
Hey, Meg, when
Yes.
you swap slides, will you tell us?
Yes.
We can't really
Oh,
see
yeah,
that, so we're just going off the paper copy.
I will be glad to.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Thank you.
right now I'm on slide 4. So, so here's the impact of investing. Oh, yeah, that's where I was. Okay. So the state general fund investment has been critical for delivering projects that are important to all of us. And GDOT's project delivery begins with fiscal discipline. We're required by federal law to balance our program of proposed projects directly with our incoming revenue, our budget. So we update cost estimates continuously, starting in the planning process to the design concept 30% plans, 60% plans, final plans. We also require annual estimate updates from our designers to ensure that our total program cost estimate reflects the latest design changes. And this is all in an effort to make sure that our proposed list of projects stays balanced within our overall budget. But where we truly stand out and apart nationally is how we evaluate construction bids. We compare construction bids to what we call the engineer's estimate. And this is a final estimate that serves as a benchmark for evaluating construction bids. Under GDOT policy, the Office of Engineering Services, who reports directly to the chief engineer, builds our official, confidential engineer's estimate from the bottom up, analyzing labor, equipment, haul distances, and getting material quotes just like a contractor does, rather than relying on historical averages. And the result of this is that our engineer's estimate routinely comes within 3% of the winning low bid, compared to the 10 to 15% variance seen in most other states. A few years ago, an independent state audit review highlighted this bottom-up method as an exceptional industry practice. So we don't just take the lowest bid and assume it's a good price. We vigorously verify that taxpayers are getting true market value. Slide change. To walk you through how this estimating process works in detail and to share the cost trends we're currently tracking across key project types and bid items, I'll turn it over to Walt Taylor, State Project Review Engineer, who will cover the engineer's estimate and bid review process, cost by project type, and cost for select pay items. You'll see in these slides that some of these cost trends appear to peak in 2024, and we've seen some prices come down a little bit in the last year, but overall, the cost increases since 2020 have been significant. Walt?
Thank you, Meg. As Meg mentioned, I will briefly discuss our engineer's estimate process, then show you some construction cost trends on different project types and different pay item categories. Our estimate process follows these two policies on the slide. And these policies cover who and when we submit the engineer's estimate, and also how it's used when comparing to contractor bids. Next slide. Now this slide shows our approach, which, as Meg mentioned, is unique nationally in that we use cost-based pricing as well as historic bid pricing. Now, a lot of states only use historic bid-based pricing, and I have to say our estimators do a great job with this cost development. Next slide. Now, this is who uses the engineer's estimate. The estimating committee reviews the estimate for quality and accuracy and provides concurrence. And after the bids are received at the letting, they compare the low bids and make a recommendation to the bid review committee on whether to award or reject the project. Then the bid review committee takes in that recommendation from the estimating committee, also looks at the bids, and then they make their own recommendation whether to award or reject the project. Now, starting with the next slide, I'm going to show you some construction cost trends for different project types. This is the trend in construction cost per mile for urban widenings. And for context, urban widenings are roads with curb and gutter. It doesn't necessarily mean location of the project. An example would be State Route 20 going from Forsyth to Cherokee, although that's developing pretty good, but that would be an urban roadway. Now also the cost shown here and on the next few slides represents construction cost only. And as you can see on this slide, from calendar year 2020 to calendar year 2025, there's been a 54% increase in urban widenings. This next slide shows the trends in cost per mile for rural widenings and new location projects. Again, rural doesn't necessarily mean location. It refers to roads with grass shoulders. And as the slide indicates here, for these type projects, there's been an 81% increase from calendar year 2020 to 2025. This next slide shows trends in construction costs per square foot for bridge replacement projects. Now, this data does not include deep water bridge replacement like you may have over Lake Lanier, or bridge replacements that are within a widening project or interchange project. And I also wanted to point out here that from calendar year 20 to 2024, there was a 55% increase. But as the slide indicates, from 2020 to 2025, there's actually been a 2% decrease in construction cost. And based on trends we're seeing into 26, based on the numbers we're seeing into 2026, the trend is kind of continuing. And one of the things we think, one of the reasons we think this is happening is for bridge projects, we do get a lot of bidders, which just creates more competitive bids. So that's sort of the trend there. Now, this next slide is showing the trends in construction per square yard of impervious area for roundabout projects. And for context, impervious area is pavement, splitter island, center island, sidewalk, curb and gutter. And as the slide indicates, there's been a 39% increase from calendar year 2020 to 2025. Now, this next slide, it's showing the trend in construction costs per 12 foot of lane miles for non-interstate resurfacing projects. Now, resurfacing projects are sort of like our bread and butter at GDOT. We let a lot of resurfacing projects. We also get a lot of bidders making it pretty competitive. But as indicated on the slide, from 2020 to 2025, there's been a 42% increase for asphalt resurfacing projects. And then the next slide is cost trends for resurfacing interstate. Still in the construction cost per 12 foot of lane miles, And as you can see, we don't get as many interstate resurfacing projects as non-interstate, but we still do a lot. And then there's been a 62% increase in these costs from 2020 to 2025. Now this is the last project type. Starting with this slide and the next view, I'm going to show you the low bid cost for several different categories of pay items by fiscal year. Now these pay items do not, pay items shown do not reflect all pay items, just the typical ones we use on GDOT projects. And also, when you look at these costs, keep in mind that bid cost includes more than just material. It includes fuel, hauling, installation, labor, equipment, among other things. And as you can see on this side, this is for asphalt pay items. There's been an average increase of 47% from 2020 to 2026. The next category is graded aggregate base, and this slide shows that there has been an average cost increase of 60% for these pay items. And again, these aren't all the GAB pay items. They're just the ones we typically use most often. This next slide shows the trending cost for the types and sizes of concrete storm drain pipe pay items typically used in GDOT projects. And again, as it indicates, there's been a 127% increase for these pay items from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 26. And the next slide's continuing with some drainage items. This is showing the trends of cost for different types and groups of inlet structures typically used on GDOT projects. And this indicates an average cost of increase of 196% from FY20 to 26. And I just wanted to say that this slide and the previous one with drainage structures, even though there's been a large increase in cost, they are relatively small components when you look at the bigger projects that we do. This next category is showing the trends of costs for bridge beam pay items typically used on GDOT projects. And you can see here that there's been a 61% average increase for these pay items from FY20 to FY26. And the next two slides I'll talk about guardrail. The first one is for guardrail itself in linear feet. This has been an average increase of 30% from FY20 to FY26. And the next slide are the guardrail anchors, and that has also shown a average 30% increase from FY20 to FY26. Now this slide, it shows the trends in cost per ton for the different aggregate stone prices that GDOT uses in our internal estimate workups. And these prices come directly from the quarries when our estimators receive quotes. Now, aggregate is a component in a lot of items and that we use in our highway construction. In fact, the aggregate is a component in all the materials I previously mentioned except guardrail. And you can see that there's been a 136% average increase in aggregate price from FY20 to FY26. With that, I'll turn it back over to Meg. Thank you.
Thank you, Walt. So contrary to what you might expect, the market competition across Georgia remains strong. We are actually receiving more bids per project today than in recent years, so cost increases aren't driven by a lack of contractor interest or uncompetitive pricing. However, because GDOT is legally required to maintain a fiscally constrained program, rising construction costs force hard choices. When inflation causes a project cost to increase, it means that we have to move something else out of our balanced statewide transportation plan. And if you move something into the next year, then it cascades something from that year in turn rolls as well. So we don't like to shift projects, and we know that schedule adjustments are very frustrating to us and to all of y'all. but it's the result of remaining fiscally constrained during this period of extreme rising costs. So we remain committed to be transparent about this as we navigate these financial realities. Next slide. So to bring it all home, while we've seen a slight stabilization in a few materials over the last year, the reality is that the long-term baseline shift since 2020 remains pretty massive. The market has not reset, and it won't be returning to pre-2020 prices. That large gap you see on this slide represents hundreds of millions of dollars in lost purchasing power of the motor fuel tax, money that directly translates to real project delays. And our normal motor fuel tax revenue is just not keeping pace with the cost of construction. But here's what I want to leave you with today. GDOT is actively managing what we can control. Our engineers' estimate process ensures that we aren't overpaying and that Georgia taxpayers are getting real market value on every single dollar spent. And we remain fiscally balanced, protecting the program's financial health even when forced to make hard scheduling choices. So the additional funds that y'all have provided in the last few years haven't just helped. They've been a vital lifeline that have kept critical projects moving forward across Georgia. So we're deeply grateful for your continued investment and your trust as we navigate these challenges. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for your time today. And Walt and I, along with the rest of our leadership team here, are happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, well, thank you, Meg and Walt. Yeah, I have a few. Maybe I'll spur some of our members on also. I guess on that last one, you know, slide 24, construction cost outpacing revenues, use the national data.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see the southern data, the Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
Florida, maybe South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, what their costs are in relation to, because the first thing, of course, I think of when I see national, I think of California and New York, which I want to throw out right off the top. But for me, I'd like to see I think it'd be more relevant to what we do, if it's
Definitely see
possible.
what we can do to try to boil that information down to the southeastern states.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Just a couple others I had. What is your, I looked at, you show the rural widening projects, and we do a lot of them. That was 81% up and versus urban. I would have thought urban would have been way higher than the rural. I don't know what slide it is, but it's early on.
I think it just depends maybe on the mix of projects at that point in time, but the rural projects usually have a lot more earth moving as well.
Just the earth moving it?
I haven't,
I'm just curious.
Could depend, but yeah.
Because I would have thought the urban one had been.
And the
just
urban
due
projects have a lot more cost in right of way, which is not shown in these costs.
Yeah. What'd you say, Lauren?
With everything.
Yeah. Lauren's mumbling over here. Okay. Well, thank you. That's my curiosity. I remember when we passed House Bill 170, specifically about the bridge issues, that we had so few contractors in the bridge building business. And it's one of those little things the public will never probably not know, that due to that, we have a number of bridge companies, a number of that are out there now because we were able to fund it.
We have put out a lot of bridge work in the last 10 years.
We sure have. That's great. Y'all talking fast, and I'm writing fast. So, curiosity on the pay items on asphalt. Probably could get the contractors also, all those different types. I guess those are going on different types of projects. Are they going on interstates versus rural routes? There's 4 different types.
Yeah. Josh, do you want to take that? Sure.
So what you're seeing here is the 9.5 millimeter super pave. That's typically on a lower volume off-system type roadways. Your 25 millimeter would be your base. It's actually part of the structure of the pavement. Your 12.5 millimeter super pave would be your surfacing course, and you're going to see that on state routes and on-system roadways throughout. I mean, it could be a low volume state route or a higher volume, and then the 19 millimeter is your interlayer. So that's that 12 and a half, 19 and 12 or 25 millimeter. They're all used in the asphalt structure.
I get. Thank you. So which is the one we use the most of?
Out of these, I would venture to say that the 12 and a half millimeter. It's a surfacing course. It's used in resurfacing and new construction.
Okay. All righty. Other committee members, y'all have any? Go ahead, Representative Lim.
Thank you for the presentation. It tells a very clear picture. Do you have data on both the historical trends, but also projections for the sources of revenue? I very much understand that motor fuel taxes are a substantial, overwhelmingly the greatest part of the budget, and obviously we've suspended that. But I also would love a picture of the federal funding for that passes through, that accounts for the state budget, because as we consider this very clear picture, it would be helpful to see the revenue streams and, again, historically where they've been, but also where they might, as much as possible, we can forecast that.
You want to take this, Josh?
Yeah, we can. So Congress is presently working on a new reauthorization bill for the next 5 years. So once we see what they ultimately do there, typically when we're building our projections, the planning team, the finance team, they're basically using a 2% adjuster, 2 to 3% adjuster. We'll see whether the ultimate highway bill, next reauthorization, does that, or do we see something consistent with IIJA where they had a significant infusion? Presently, our operating assumption is going to be a much more milder inflation adjustment to the next reauthorization bill. So you just take the current revenues we get, we're adding about 1.5%, 2% each year to that. So.
And I'll just add for the record, would love to see all 16 of those 85 corridor study projects funded, and so putting that in the record.
We'll write that down.
I'm just a local resident, and I actually thought
Oh, sure. Yes, ma'am.
I actually thought this was strictly about Fort Bend County because I saw the post. By the way, the address was not on the post, but whatever. So I'm obviously coming from this from a very, I'm a person who pays my taxes for the roads and everything, and same with the transportation and GDOT things are. The revenue that we get from the state from gas tax obviously is what drives most of the construction that gets done, regardless of the bids and the cost going up in inflation. The one thing that I don't ever see enough in any of the GDOT proposals is that they never reference how the impact of the changing of electric cars and electrical driving vehicles, they don't necessarily contribute to the gas tax in the same way. And the state now has, changed their green laws and the discounts on those cars, but it seems to me they actually are the heavier kind of destructor on roads, given the weights of the roads, of the vehicles. And I haven't seen the state or federally really make any sort of concessions for them contributing to the roads that they actually travel quite more frequently, especially with Amazon and all these things becoming electrical vehicles.
Yes, ma'am. You're certainly not an electric vehicle driver.
Oh, no.
Because you would be yelling at me, as other people do, that they pay a fee. They pay a fee instead of.
Is it a one-time fee or
It's an annual fee.
And how much does that fee compare to this average household?
If you're a EV driver, you're saying it's way too damn much, and we need to reduce it. And if you're like me, a pickup truck driver, you're saying it's okay.
And if you are a person who charges electrical vehicles, commercial providers, like an Amazon or whatever, do they also have a tax when they're charging their electrical that actually then offsets?
Yeah, good questions. Yeah, that is something we did pass a bill a few years ago to address that, but we've been able to get the nitty gritty to get it done, and we'll be addressing that again this year.
So would that be something that's actually a part of the Georgia Power has, not changing rates, but they have expansions of grids, and then you get discounts on those things. But it seems to me that commercial is what drives county projects, right? And commercial obviously drives federal projects, and then the taxpayers offset a lot of that just by consumption. So where is the actual
Yeah, we'll be, like I said, we'll be addressing that. You know, we've got to find, because we certainly want to make sure that everybody that rolls on our roads is paying their fair share. Because we've got to make sure, and I guess I'm pretty emphatic that I want as much money as I can to do road work and to hire contractors to do the work throughout our state. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah. Any other members have questions for Holt?
Meg, thanks for the presentation. Again, you always bring a lot of good information to us and the data to make decisions. But could you just speak briefly to the increase in cost of right-of-way acquisition and how that's also challenging for us, increase in land prices, and if somebody is not willing to take the offer and it goes to court, how that hangs up projects?
So that's definitely been a cost driver in projects as well. Georgia's developing, land is very valuable, and we are paying more, especially in urban areas up this corridor. You can see that it's very competitive to get land, and in some cases we're spending as much on right-of-way as we are on the construction project. So we've definitely seen an increase. I don't have the statistics in my head to tell you, but I'll be glad to provide you numbers of what that looks like. And, you know, and our process, it's been the same for many, many years. And we do go through our due diligence to get several appraisals. We make an offer, and we try to negotiate. If we can't negotiate and we're on a tight schedule, we can condemn the property, in which case they receive the funds that we made in our fair market value offer while we then settle that condemnation issue, but the project can move on. We only condemn, I'd say, about 4% of properties, you know, overall what we buy, and we buy, you know, thousands of properties a year. So, but I'll be happy to bring more information to you about that in the future.
Anybody else? I just had one more that when we were going through the slides on asphalt resurfacing. You know, it's something that's been very close to me. I looked at the slide. You're looking at the project numbers, you know, 149 in 21, 104 in 22. And then it goes down to 60 and 61 in 24 and 25. Is that because those in the last 2 years have just been larger projects, or is it what's the?
I think it's because they cost more, so we're resurfacing about half of what we used to.
Okay, it's a cost issue.
Yeah.
Here.
But y'all did give us some more money with state general funds. Some of that went to resurfacing, I think, in FY24, and that helped too.
Sure. Okay. I think that's all. Thank you, Meg.
All right. Thank y'all.
And your team. Appreciate you. Next up, Barron. I met Barron a couple of weeks ago in our tour of Vulcan. Glad he's come over today from Birmingham, right? Right. And to kind of give us a view of what's going on in the construction aggregate world. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Barron.
So, good morning, Chairman and members of the Blue Ribbon Committee. My name is Barron Worthington. I'm the VP of Market Support Services for Vulcan Materials. I've worked for the company. It's coming up on about to have my 30th anniversary. I spent probably the first third of my career in our sales and operating group in Alabama. I actually spent some time in outside sales as well. Probably for the last 15 or 16 years, I've been in the role that I am with the company. I am essentially an industrial economist. I do economic analysis and forecasting for the company. That's not my presentation. I'll give it. But so while she's doing
we don't want to get into that for sure.
I would like to read a quick statement, and then we can switch over to the presentation. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to represent Vulcan today. On behalf of our 1,200 employees in Georgia and their families, I commend your leadership to modernize Georgia's transportation system. Your commitment to historic infrastructure investment, complemented by the federal funding under IIJA, is essential to sustaining Georgia's economic growth and improving our communities. Vulcan Materials is proud to supply the materials needed for these critical projects. We take our role as stewards of taxpayer resources seriously. My goal today is to provide you with a clearer understanding of our company, the industry, specifically how aggregates are produced and delivered into projects, and to discuss the realities of current inflationary environment as it relates to construction materials. Okay, you're good. I can probably, we're gonna pull up a slide about Vulcan, and I can probably tell you a little bit about.
Sure, go ahead, man.
About the company. We're gonna see a map in just a second. You'll see our footprint. We have operations in 24 states, also DC. We're really in that Sun Belt state area. Okay, we got it up now. Okay, I got the clicker here. All right. So, this is a look at our footprint. Again, we have over 400 operations across coast to coast. We've got more than 11,000 employees. Ooh, it's cutting off part of the. Okay, well, we'll have to work with that. Again, we very proud of the company. We've been named one of the best employers, one of the most responsible companies. Again, very proud of what Vulcan and what we've accomplished. At the top, that header, this is an internal creed in Vulcan that we live by. We want to do the right thing the right way at the right time. And I think that creed, that belief, that comes through in some of the things that we've accomplished. We're an industry leader in safety. Again, we want to be good stewards of our resources. And more importantly, when you run quarries and you're in backyards of people, you have to be good neighbors. And we want to be actively involved in the communities. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tell you, we are on slide, I guess, let's see, slide 4 right now. So, and again, we're actively involved. The company is involved in the communities. The employees are involved. We do tours. I think Representative Jaspers, you had the opportunity to tour the quarry. You heard Nate's story about his wife touring it when she was a little girl. So again, we want to participate. We will be a part of the community. This is a look at Vulcan. Really, let's zoom down into where it is in Georgia. Vulcan, we have 43 operations, but that's really a combination of stone quarries and distribution yards. I'll explain the distribution yard and facilities in a second. Again, as we mentioned, over 1,200 employees. Here are some of the major projects that we've participated in over the last few years. To the right, that's the Norcross Quarry. Again, you had the opportunity to tour that. It's been in operation for more than 70 years. And we've got a big project I'll talk about a little bit more going on there right now. Next, so to get everyone kind of educated on the industry itself, I think it's helpful. Let's zoom out. Let's look at the whole U.S. This is a map. You'll see, if you can see it on your picture, there's red dots and there's orange squares on that. The red dots represent all the active stone quarries that reported man hours in 2025, and then the other ones are the sand and gravel operations. So you can see they're really kind of spread out. They get a little more dense in other areas, but then the more rural you get, they get more spread out. There's about 100,000 employees in this industry, a little under 10,000 operations, but 5,000 companies. If you do some quick math, in your head, what that makes you realize is there's a lot of just companies that run one operation. When you think about kind of what the split is, about 1/3 of all of the operations are stone and 2/3 of them are sand and gravel. But when you think about the products and what comes out, what's actually produced, it's really the other way around. The stone operations really produce almost 2/3 of all the material that gets consumed. Real quick, so we start at the U.S. Let's go down to Georgia and see how that relates to Georgia. You can see it's a similar map, red dots, orange squares. May not be able to see the color quite as well, but I think one of the first things you notice is the red dots are all really kind of congregating up towards the top part of the state. I'll get into it in a minute why that's the case. Over to the right, what you'll notice is the USGS does annual surveys of all the operations. They do estimates of production. They also do estimates of what the value of the product is going out. At Georgia, it was reported in 2025, it's about $1.8 billion. Now, the list of companies over to the right, there's an industry organization, the Georgia Construction Aggregates Association. Most of us in the industry just know it as GCAA. Those are the 8 producing members. Really, that institution, it's there to really help with, good workplace safety protocols. It helps with environmental stewardship, but more importantly, what it helps with in the industry is it's an avenue to educate and develop, our leaders and our workers in the industry. So this is we're gonna have a little bit of quarrying 101, really soup to nuts, start to finish. How do you open a quarry to the point of where you're shipping it out of the gate? Really, that first piece of it is identifying where material is. It's got to be good quality material. You've got to do preliminary designs. You have to get permitting, and that first part of that process typically can take multiple years. So that's really a long, extended process. Once you get all those proper approvals, get a plant designed, then you have to start preparing the site. You can do that really in 2 ways. First, you have to prepare the site to build a plan on, and then you're also where the active quarry is going to be. You start working on that piece of it. And in most cases, you really have to remove a good portion of the top of the material. It's probably not as good to use. So again, you have to prepare that site. Once that's done, you get your plant built. Then that's when you start feeding material through the plant. You start processing it. You're going to crush it. You're going to wash it. Then you're going to start putting it in piles, sort it, and then finally the truck comes to the gate, comes in the quarry, you load him up, and then you get him ticketed and go out the gate. That whole process takes a tremendous amount of effort. There's a lot of people working on that, and there's a tremendous amount of capital that gets involved to get from that start to finish. Oh, sorry. So a lot of the conversation today is going to be about highways, and highways are super important, but I think, one of the things to understand about the aggregates industry is highways are just a part of what we're supplying aggregates to. When you think about construction, and just about anything that's built new out of the ground is going to consume aggregates. A single-family home's going to, apartments are going to. You're building a school, it's going to use it in the concrete. Even there's some things that are even built underground. Think about piping. You have to put stone typically under piping. So a new manufacturing facility. So all of these things are going to consume aggregate. Moving it back though to highways, that being said, even though highways probably represents about roughly 25% of aggregate demand, without that 25% going into highways, none of these other things are going to happen. You have to have the roads to get to the manufacturing facility, to get to the single-family houses. So again, that's how important, even though it's not necessarily the biggest piece of what's being consumed, it's probably the linchpin that keeps everything else going. Okay, so I think one of the questions we talked about or had been asked was, what are the drivers? What are the things that can drive cost at a quarry? I'm going to start on the left side. I think there were some questions about, are there any public policies? There's really, kind of a list of things that typically could impact the cost. Think about that at the top. I mentioned it earlier. Think about zoning or permitting. That's really the early part of the process. Even once a quarry is active, there may be still issues with that going on. That's a lengthy, expensive process to start. Think about operator rules. Even though there's maybe some state regulations, there may be local requirements. We may be limited in fact, Norcross, I think we discussed it, we have a limitation of the hours of which we can operate. Think about aggregates. It's not this smooth process where we're shipping every day at the same rate. We have projects that go up and down. And when we do that, and we have to live within those limitations of those operating hours, we have to adjust things like labor. We may have to bring in extra equipment to really fit in within those operating rules, of which we, very much willing to do. Transportation regulations. This is a little less at the quarry cost, but stone's made at the quarry, but it's got to get to the project. And there are regulations that dictate how much material can be loaded onto a truck. So if, the lower that is, you think about you're spreading the cost over larger volumes. If you limit that to a certain level, then you're raising the cost of the transportation piece of it. Lastly, incentives. This really leads into the demand side of it. Think about state incentives, economic incentives, great things, bringing industry in, but you may all of a sudden produce this dramatic spike in demand, which all of a sudden the quarries have to work around. It's like, oh, well, this was a 500,000 ton quarry, which now we need to make 800,000 or 900,000 tons. So again, labor, you got equipment that you're going to have to do. You may even have to modify or add things to the plant to handle those type of situations. On the federal side, I think everybody's aware of what's been going on. The administration's change or the view of tariffs has changed. Those are inputs. They're affecting inputs in our business. They're affecting inputs in our customers' businesses, and really just about anyone that's touching something that's imported. That environmental requirements, think about like the wetlands mitigation. I think we may have mentioned it earlier, but wetlands mitigation is something that has an added cost to it. I'm going to move over to the production side now. The labor, I'm going to skip those first three because I'm going to go into a little more detail. I'm on the slide. Sorry, I keep not telling you when I'm switching the slide here. So I'm going to skip the geology and the production and the sales product mix. I'm going to move to the type of work. So we view work in several different ways. Public and private work we view as differently because sometimes the requirements are very different. Think about a highway project. We showed up there all those super paved mixes and other things. There are very specific requirements of what the stone can be, and that can affect the cost of it. I'll show you a picture. You'll get to see a picture in a minute of stone, but to meet those specifications, it costs more. There's a more production cost. You're washing material. You're doing additional things to it. So the public-private may affect something. Length of the project. Think about this. Private work, single-family home gets built in 6 to 9 months. When we think about how we want to, quote, work for something like that, we have this very short window of exposure. But if you switch over to a highway project like a Georgia 400, that's going to go 3 years, 4 years. We've been shipping on some projects more than 5 years. So if you think about that and the exposure, I'll take you back to 2020. Did anyone, hey, shame on me, I didn't see it either, but if you thought about what you thought inflation was going to be at the end of 2019 to where it is today, would anybody have guessed it? Would you have priced that into what you were thinking the cost was going to be going forward? So length does have an impact on it. Lastly, capital investments and fixed cost. This is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a capital-intensive business. We've got high fixed cost. It almost like your demand will go up and down at particular locations, but you still have these heavy fixed costs. Example of the capital investment, Chairman Jaspers, you had the opportunity to see it. We're investing more than $100 million right now at Norcross. And that $100 million will help us continue to serve projects, to run that operation. It's not the first time it's been rebuilt. Probably won't be the last time it's rebuilt. So we'll have to continue. And in between those big rebuilds, we're constantly doing additional capital investment. Last, I'll just touch real briefly on the labor side of it. I think this is any industry, almost anyone out there, we recognize there's a difficulty in finding skilled laborers. We think about we need welders, we need heavy equipment operators. We're competing, within our own industry. We're competing with other industries. Do you think about working in a rock quarry? Sometimes people just don't want to go do that kind of work. Construction's probably dealing with the same situation. Would they rather go work in an Amazon warehouse, or would they rather go work at a Buc-ee's? I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen the sign at Buc-ee's, but you can make a lot of money if you're a general manager at Buc-ee's. So that's another thing. Again, we have to pay competitive wages. That drives our cost. So I'm going to step back to those three items that I mentioned. These are things that can impact the cost. So there's, I guess the animation didn't work, but that's okay. So there's a term that's within our industry called the fall line. And if you'll see, this is a look at the southeastern states, and you'll see that black dashed line that goes through. Essentially, that represents a line of delineation between geology types. So if you go above that line, you're more likely, or you have the potential to find stone. But if you go below that line, you're much less likely to. And in fact, in Georgia, you see all the red dots are north of that line or sitting on that line, and there are no red dots below that. So if you wanted to go put a quarry in Valdosta, I guess, good luck. You're going to be digging really deep in the ground to try before you'll ever hit rock. So that lets you know that, again, there are only certain places that these can go in Georgia. The second thing is the three predominant types of geology that you guys have for aggregates, for construction aggregates. It's granite, limestone, and sand and gravel. Granite's the predominant stone. There's a limited amount of limestone in the state. And then you can see sand and gravel really can be really north or south of the state. So you know you've found a place, you see rock on the ground. Well, does that mean you can put a quarry there? You know, not necessarily. Quality of the material is important. DOT projects have certain specifications. You grade stone. There's certain soundness and hardness tests. If it doesn't meet those, then it may not be a good construction aggregate. So you've got to have good quality. Think about distance from the job. Like, where does the material need to be needed? So in this case, you could be 100 miles away from the outer ring of Atlanta in the middle of a rural area. You may have the best rock sitting on top of the ground, but it may not make sense to put a quarry there because you have to transport it to where it's needed, in this case where the people are. If you think about it, this is a good way to think about if you have to put material on a truck and take it past a certain distance, the transportation will eventually just start costing more than the material itself. That's why you see stone operations so close to where the people are. And you'll see them close together because at some point, you're going to reach a point where it's more expensive than it is to go to the one that's a little farther down the road. So that's distance from the job. The last thing is transportation options. There's purple triangles up there, and that's getting back to the original comment about distribution facilities. We have distribution facilities in the southern part of Georgia. We do actually transport material long distances. It's not typically by truck. It's going to be by rail, and in some cases it may come in by water. Georgia, if it has any by water, it's coming in off in the Savannah and the port area. But in this case, everything in our yards that we have, we move everything, most everything by train. Again, thinking about trains, you know, there's an expense associated with that. You produce the material at the quarry in the north part of the state. We have to actually put in special equipment to load trains. We have to put track into our plants. Then we have to transport it down there, which adds more transportation cost. Then we have to unload it. We have to operate a yard. Then we have to load it back into a truck. And then, you know, once you're buying off of that yard, you're paying all those additional costs just beyond the cost at the quarry. So that's a look at really the geology piece of it. So I think one of the questions that we had gotten was CPI, and the DOT showed the CPI earlier about how it compared to others. I think it's helpful to let's understand what CPI measures and what are quarries buying, what are we purchasing. If you see on the left the CPI index, you've got you're buying food and you're paying for your housing. That's really the two biggest pieces of CPI. They carry the most weight, but you're also buying clothes, you're putting gas in your car, again, mostly gasoline. You're paying for health care. So you can see that's really what a consumer, someone in their everyday life, is going out and buying. You move over to the right and look at what is it that we're buying and what are we spending money on. We have these heavy mobile equipment that we have to, first of all, if you purchase one, they can be $1 million or more of what we're using at the quarry. We have all of this fixed plant assets. Chairman Jaspers, you saw the one that we're building out there. You saw how much steel, and it was like only 30% complete. It had not even had all the things up there. So we have all this equipment. We have to maintain that equipment. Now, I mentioned earlier that Georgia's blessed with granite. Granite is fantastic for building roads. It really is. It makes great surface material. However, it is extremely abrasive and tough on metal and on our equipment. Great for roads, but hard for us. We have a higher maintenance cost just because we're processing granite, as opposed to limestone, which the cost might not be as hard. It's just not as hard a material on the equipment. We're purchasing energy just like consumers are, but on a much different scale. We're buying diesel, which incidentally is higher than gasoline, but we consume large amounts of it. Drilling and blasting, I think there's some of the chemicals that we use on the blasting side of it are being impacted. The costs are being impacted by what's going on in the Middle East right now in the Strait of Hormuz. Thinking about transportation, Mentioned we're moving material from quarries in some cases down to yards. In most of those cases, we're also dealing with one railroad. We have one option to go down. There's not railroads everywhere. You just can't pick who you want to take things down there. You've got to be on that railroad to get it there typically. Lastly, I mentioned it earlier, we're paying competitive wages and salaries. So that's really, hopefully this kind of helps you understand that that basket of goods is very different than what we're doing and what we're purchasing. I think the GDOT showed this. This was something, we see that index. I thought one of the things that would be helpful, next slide, is this is really all of the components that make up that highway cost index. So there's a tremendous amount of items in there. Aggregates feeds into several of those. Directly, you can see there they show base stone and that miscellaneous stone and riprap. Those are the few products that would actually go from the quarry to the job site. Most all those other ones are going somewhere else and having another process done to them. They're having more, like asphalt gets binder. You have to transport it to the asphalt plant. Then you have to put the binder on it, heat it up. Then you have to load it back on a truck. You're putting labor on it. Then you have to take it to the job site. Then you have equipment. Then you have people running the equipment. So you have all these additional costs after it leaves the quarry. On the right side, I just thought it'd be helpful. I picked a little bit different, I think, measuring point. I picked the end of 2019. I think it was fourth quarter of 2019 is my starting point. That index is up about 70%. One thing to note is that's it's lagged right now. We have not seen the last 2 months. That number does not, last 2 quarters. We have not seen what's happened to this index since the start of the war in the Middle East with Iran. So I suspect we're going to see, based on those next two, what's happened to what liquid asphalt is up. It doesn't show on the screen, but it's up 110%. Diesel's up 98% from 2019. And just as a reference point, I thought it'd be helpful. I'm showing that fourth bar, the construction materials index. Think about that. We talked about the CPI and that basket of goods. This is a basket of goods of just construction materials, nothing else. And it covers all parts of construction. So think about this. It's got things that go in a house. It's got things that go in a road. It's got things that go in a new manufacturing facility, a water treatment plant. It's just a basket. It's about 40 products roughly. It's up over that period of time about 61%. And again, these are national numbers. I went ahead and pulled the construction sand and gravel and stone. It's up about the same amount. I think the point here is like the costs are going up, but they are going up across all aspects of construction. Okay. This is going to be a quick. Make sure my time's good. Okay. So real quick, this is want to set you with so you can understand the products because we're going to talk about product mix next. This is far left is your base product. Think about that as 1.5 inch material down to dust. It's typically just like in the name. It's what goes at the bottom of projects typically. That coarse stone, I'm showing a 78 and an 89. Those are products that get used in asphalt. You notice that if you can see it, they're clean. They typically get washed, and those are generally more expensive to make because there's more processing that goes in those. And then finally, there's a fine product. Manufactured sand. That's another product that goes into asphalt. Again, there's more effort. We actually have separate parts of the plant where we'll produce this product in particular. So again, hopefully that helps you understand the products. Now next slide, we're going to talk about the shift in product mix and how that can impact the plant cost. So if we sell more of one product and less of another product, that will impact our production cost. So in this case right here, you're looking at a cross-section of a road. You're seeing that's where the base course is. You saw the base material at the bottom below that asphalt. That next level is that fine and coarse. Those are the more expensive products to make. And what we do is we're, of course, selling those to the asphalt plants. They have to transport it to the asphalt plant. Then they have to do their piece to it, and then they'll lay it. If you can see it, you can actually see layers of asphalt. Like they do this in layers. I think if we went back and looked, if we go back, I've got it on the left, the graph. If we went back 10 years ago to see what was that split, what was the product mix like, it was a little more balanced where we were selling more base material, which helps us, again, balance the plant. These other clean products, the more we produce of them, the more waste products we're producing. And if you'll see what happened when you fast forward 10 years later to where we are today, we're selling a lot more of those expensive products, the coarse products and the fine products, and less of that base. It causes us an imbalance issue at our plants. You saw the piles, I should say, or the mountains at Norcross. I would suspect if you're going to go to Mark Marietta's quarry today, you will see a similar picture. This is not unique to Vulcan. Everybody will deal with this. So that shift in this highway end use, this is only the portion that we sell to the highway end use, has shifted, and now we're really driving. That's really driving more of the production needs. Okay. Lastly, I guess this is just, I won't spend just a second on this one. I thought it was helpful to at least see what do aggregates mean as part of total construction. You can, again, the USGS gives us a value for what aggregates being produced and sold are, and then we can go out. The census gives us a value of here's what the total value of all construction in Georgia is, and when you kind of lay those and take the ratio of it, it's really run consistently between 3 and 4% of all the value of construction. Now that is everything, so that's single family, that's manufacturing. It's certainly going to be higher for some, just like highway. Highway's going to consume more aggregates as a portion of the cost. But you can see relative to over time, it's really stayed pretty flat. That's really my last slide. I appreciate the opportunity to come up here. Vulcan, we understand this is extremely important. We recognize the value of infrastructure. I'll go back to it again. That 25% of aggregate that goes to highways is so important to everything else that happens in Georgia, and we want to help in any way we can. And I thank you for your for the time, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you've got.
Well, sure. Baron, thank you for a good view. You're kind of representing, all the members you had on that one slide, and not just be picking on you for sure. Gary has a question right here.
I do. I know the life cycle of these are years and years and years and years, but when you close down a facility, there's a huge expense for y'all to, is that included in this cost, and are y'all putting a little bit away as you go because of that?
We recognize there's reclamation costs at the end when you do it. I can't answer that, so I'll say I don't know the answer to that.
And the reason I ask it is there was a local expansion in our area. One of the companies wanted to expand because it was getting close to the end where they were at, and they wanted to expand to keep from having to go back and start addressing the closure cost or whatever. It was what I was told. I don't know that was correct or in.
Different world. We're in California. The reclamation costs in California are really expensive. So it is a cost. There's a cost. When you get permitting, you agree to, once you're finished, you'll leave the property in some certain condition.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman McDonald.
Yes, thank you. Everything we do as legislators representing the districts that we're there to serve is we're dealing with taxpayer money. So, we have to look at it as protecting the consumer, the taxpayer, and even ourselves, because we're all businessmen and businesswomen that live in our communities. Would it be, looking at aggregate and looking at the transportation and all that you talked about that it takes to produce the rock, would it be cheaper to import rock?
No, because if you're talking about bringing it from ocean vessels, we had a quarry in Mexico. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore. We did import material, but that is typically to markets where there isn't local stone. If you go to Savannah and you either rail it or put it on a truck, it's going to get more expensive to try to get it to Atlanta. It's in some markets it would work, but that's because there's just not native material there.
What about looking at the fall line, that area right there? Would that be something that we should look at to supply growth in South Georgia, bringing aggregate by ship in there? Because of what you talked about is all the expense to get it to different areas but that area doesn't have the quarries.
That's right. If you want to build a road in Valdosta, it's just more expensive because of that. There is material that gets brought into ports all along the Gulf Coast. You saw that fall line. There's a big space. They go all the way from Brownsville, Texas, to all the way up the eastern seaboard. So there are ports. Material does come in. I couldn't tell you how much, and we'd have to probably look at it. I can assure you, if there was a way to do it, we would look at it as well. So again, we've got resources, or we had resources where we could do that.
Would, as a state, would it behoove the state or DOT to work with an aggregate supplier just to like, say you got your Norcross plant, and we've got in Vulcan, we've got Martin Marietta up here. Would it behoove the state to negotiate with one of those, with all the projects that will be going up 400, 285 on the northern part, to negotiate with just one supplier to try to get the price down? And because the distance is going to be about the same, so now you're just dealing. I don't know any other independent. Is there any independents in this area?
That was 8 members up there. That didn't represent all those dots. I can't speak exactly how many there are, but that didn't cover, like, those 8 companies don't own everything in Georgia. So
are there any independents in the North Georgia area?
I can't answer that. Probably Stephen.
Yes, there are. They're not abundant, but there are a few independently privately owned aggregate companies that are operating. Okay. One of our members, Luckstone, on your south there, they're privately owned.
Where are they located?
They're in Forest Park.
Okay.
To your other question about negotiating, I'll leave that to Brian and Stephen for the negotiating piece. If that's an option, that's above my pay grade. So.
You still thinking?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm going to give everybody a break a second. I got more.
Down here, Vance, Representative Smith.
So you showed the timeline from start to finish when you decide you're going to put a quarry in to go. What's the average number of years from the time you pick out an area till you can be functional and be selling rock?
There's extremes where my understanding of what I was told was our Cherokee operation took a decade to from start to finish. But I would say you're looking at, again, mostly just estimating at least 4 to 5 years probably to get an operation from the, hey, I've got the idea, we've identified a property, to talking to all those neighbors, getting all the permitting, and to where we can run trucks out the gate. I think that's probably a fair estimate.
And your map, you cover Georgia pretty good, kind of covers like the dew, I guess you could say, but any foreseeable new quarry? I think the last quarry I realized was west of 75 in upper Upson County toward the interstate. That was the last one that opened. Have you got any on the drawing board, any new quarries coming into the state, or are you allowed to say that?
We're always actively looking to make sure we have reserves for the long term, so we're always looking. I can't speak to anyone in particular, but I would say we're always doing that. Is that fair?
That Barron quarry's been pretty good down in Columbus.
The other thing I think to think about with quarries and opening a new one, you think about the ones today. Chairman, you saw the picture of Norcross in the 50s when it was there. There was nothing around Norcross. Everything has built to it and even beyond it now. Putting a new quarry in, there's no place to put a quarry next to Norcross if you wanted to put a quarry. You're going to have to go out to that next ring where things will eventually grow to. So that's where the new quarries are typically going to come, much farther out, and let the growth come to them.
I just want to follow up on what Representative Smith was talking about. I guess there are barriers that are very significant via EPA on the federal side that restrict you. And we had a good conversation with Congressman Collins yesterday that there's a bill in Congress to accelerate or force EPA to act and not drag these things out, which limits your ability to be able to open a new quarry on that end. Are y'all familiar with what that might be somebody else's?
That's not in my
somebody else's world. Because I guess we would love for you and your association members, if there are barriers that we can look at to opening up quarries, we need to know about them. We'd love to be able to jump in there and work on them too, if we can.
The one point I will make about opening new quarries, and again, we're always looking, Georgia's consumption of aggregates has never gotten back to where it was in 2007, or 2006 was the peak. It's at least 25, 30% below. So there's that much less aggregate being sold today than there was then. So in some cases, the capacity, let me say this, there is capacity. Now, it may not be in the right place now as things have grown, but there is still capacity in the market.
Well, that's one of the questions I had, Baron, was demand. Because you made that comment the other day, and I thought it was something the committee needed to know, that 25%.
And I mentioned this is a high fixed cost business, and the more tons we get to produce and sell, the better it helps our cost. So we've never reached that level, back to that level that the state hasn't, that it was in 2006.
Sure. Okay. On the distribution yards, anybody else have any? I got Lauren next. I had to do one. Do y'all own those, or how does that work? I mean, I think I was driving through South Georgia, and I ran past one that was owned by one of our highway contractors. So I guess y'all work with them, or how does that work? Or do y'all own some of those throughout the state, throughout South Georgia?
We'll have partnerships sometimes with our customers. The customers, so for example, an asphalt plant, if they're going to do business down there, they know the most economical way to get material is by rail. They'll locate it, and then sometimes we'll partner with them so that we'll have a retail yard there, ship to them directly, but then sell retail. There are other times where we go out on our own and we'll find that piece of property, we'll find that rail spur, and then we'll open the yard, and it'll be Vulcan materials.
Oh, okay. I've seen different things. I didn't know. Chairman?
I know you're talking about 2006. I mean, the obvious is, yes, we're in a big building boom then, but what we're investing in transportation in 2026 is a lot. But we're not, we can't even use the type of that much aggregate because we can't afford it. Yeah. I mean, that is Meg's presentation, it showed how much that goes a mile. And you look at construction prices, that material fluctuates. Timber right now is at the bottom. I mean, that's, and these are independent timber people down in, Georgia. I just wonder how, do you see aggregate ever fluctuating again, or are you going to see a constant rise in the price? And two, I was trying to think. You can answer that first.
So when you think about aggregates, it's really a very localized, market specific when it comes to things like pricing. That distance that you travel with it in a truck, really causes it to be, it's more about what's happening in the local market. So do I see aggregate pricing going down? I don't, it's not like a commodity that's traded. Think about timber, how far it can go. Aggregates can't. Again, it's just very market specific. And again, you think about some of the cost pressures that we're having, and again, that heavy fixed cost and capital investment that we have. Not saying it's, it certainly could go down, grow at different rates, but we're not seeing our costs go down.
What about do y'all annually, set a number that this is the amount of aggregate we're going to pull from your quarry? I mean, y'all say this is kind of where we're going to be, or do you just produce on demand?
We estimate demand. We build sales forecasts from the bottom up by what we think is going to happen in the market. We don't say, oh, I'm only going to ship this much out of here this year, unless there's like a specific, production barrier that was like, oh, you have limited reserves or you can only do this. That would be the only reason we do that. Typically, the market dictates what we're going to sell.
Representative Lim?
Vulcan has been great partner to my commuter. I mentioned at the outset that I'm bordering the Norcross Quarry. Another thing I'll put in the record, as you all already know, to Representative Richardson's point about the life cycle in the end, would love to see in about 30, 40, 50 years that become what your former Bellwood Quarry became.
Correct.
Which was the West Side Park, a lovely investment there. On the point, and Chairman Jaspers made it a little bit, but on the point of regulations, et cetera. As I mentioned, you all have been a great partner, particularly the high school there, Meadow Creek. At the same time, I have to put this on the record as well, no more earthquakes, please.
Yeah.
As we saw on, unfortunately, July 29th. But if you could quantify for us in Georgia what the costs are of the operator rules and regulations and the transportation regulations, because I know, a couple of years ago, obviously, we have hopefully for right now put to bed the truck weight debate in Georgia. But I also understand there's surface mining permits, water permits, and you still have other transportation regulations you have to abide by. Without judging at this point whether those are good or bad, would you be able to help us quantify in Georgia what each of those regulations cost you all on an annual basis? And you also put on here incentives. You may mean mainly at the local level, but I don't want to assume that. Are there other specific types of incentives that you're thinking about that we can address at the state level?
I'll take the second one first. The incentives was really talking about how economic development packages can spur growth and spikes in demand, which all of a sudden could overwhelm an area. And again, it's kind of like your freeways, except it's not necessarily here. You think about, you have a freeway with 12 lanes. Typically you only need like 2 or 3 of them, but there's those times in the day. Atlanta, unfortunately, you need all 12 of them 24 hours a day. But it's, so it's not like you can, if you have some, I'm gonna say like a big EV manufacturing plant that gets announced and gets started, that plant will go on for a couple of years, but that's not enough to go justify building a plant 3 times the size to supply that. So those things can, again, we have to work around that with what we've got in most cases. Quantifying some of those policy issues that we saw, I'll have to defer, and we can talk with the folks in the Georgia group to see. I think one of the examples, Chairman Jaspers, you heard was there's maybe 5 different air permits that that we are required to operate in. Our customers that might be on or adjacent to our site are also getting similar permits. So there are some policies, and we can talk about like wetlands mitigation. What does that cost us? That's something we can absolutely quantify.
Good. Just 2 more things I had. One thing I was impressed at, and I guess I am impressed at this entire infrastructure of road construction and y'all and different companies, is how you treat your employees and your worker retention. I watch social media, I guess because of what I do now. It all pops up. I see all of our highway contractors and what they're doing for their employees, and I know it's the same for y'all. And I thought that was just something that I just wanted to bring out. I want to pull a little scab off here a little bit, though, because when this came up in March and we started talking about it, you don't know me very well, but I don't know how to say some things sometimes. But the overwhelming force that I got was that, and this is not probably for you to answer, but maybe for the aggregate group as a whole, that price increases were driving stock prices. And that, we, in turn, when we raised dollars for transportation, we're really not getting a lot more bang for our buck these days, but we are increasing the value of companies. And it's an underlying, someone asked me about it last week at the caucus meeting, are you going to bring this up? And I said, well, that's pulling a scab off, and I don't know if I can, but I thought I'd try anyway, because there's a frustration there, because we would love to see, we want to do things to help, whether it be environmental, transportation, whatever we can do to make our dollar go further, I think is what I think Lauren was getting at too. And I don't know how you answer that. I mean, you're not the CEO of the company, And but I think that's something that's undermining where we're at somewhat. And I just want to throw that out there, that because we want to do the best for our taxpayers.
Now I understand.
Here, anybody else? Well, thank you.
Okay.
You did a great job. We appreciate you really going through that. Next up, with the Georgia Ready Mix, Jeff Doolin. Jeff is not brand new, but just about brand new.
Yes, sir.
With our Ready Mix Concrete Association.
Yeah. I know how to work a room.
Here, here.
There they go. Well, thank you very much, Chairman Jaspers and members of the committee, for giving me the honor to represent the Georgia Ready Mix Concrete industry as part of leading the association. We'll get the slides to come up here in just a moment. There we go. Make sure we got, yeah, there we go. And so as you said, yes, I've been in my role for just over 2.5 months. And it doesn't make me new to the ready-mix concrete industry, nor the aggregate or the cement industry. I've spent the last 5 years representing the largest technology provider to these industries, and recently left that company, and this is how I'm taking my summer off. I found a wonderful way to serve. With me today is Emily Engel Fries, who handles the government affairs and other parts of the association. She's a wonderful member of the staff and couldn't do what we do without her. And also Tucker Green is here, and Tucker's our lobbyist and also helps us quite a bit. I think the timing of and I've got, my slides are numbered, so we'll go on to number 3. And I think the timing of my presentation is very good because you heard about a lot of the projects that are coming up. And you don't have to raise your hand how many times the word concrete get mentioned today. And a key part of what we need as an industry to do what we do is we need aggregate. And you heard about aggregate, and you heard about sand and where it is. And I'll touch on that as well as cement as I go through today. I put that slide up is from one of our structural engineering partners, Uzin and Case. They're a member of our association. Uzin and Case designed this building recently, but it's just another example of the Atlanta and Georgia, it's a concrete town, and Georgia's a concrete state. And John Portman, as he built out Atlanta, really embraced concrete. And as you look around the city, you'll see a lot of that everywhere. You really can't do anything without concrete. So my goal in the presentation today is I'm probably not going to get a lot into all the costs and things that are impacting the industry. I just want to give you all a perspective on the ready-mix industry in Georgia and the importance that we bring. And so I think we all know how to consume water, and it's a very important thing. But the second most consumed material in the world, other than water, is concrete, because you have to have it for everything that gets built. And we'll talk a little bit more about all of the places where that is. I'm on slide 4. So, or slide 5 rather. And so I wanted to delineate real quick, because when you say concrete, one of the first things I learned is you can't say cement. And the Beverly Hillbillies were wrong. It's not a cement pond. It's a concrete pond. Cement is a component of concrete, and I'll touch on that. When you see a lot of the concrete that you have out along the roads and the projects, you see the bridge beams, the abutments, you see the piping, you see the culverts, you see concrete block. That's not part of the ready-mix industry. Those are that's manufactured concrete. It's done in large factories in climate-controlled environments where you get tremendous amount of precision in where that's built. If you go around the world, those types of prefabricated concrete's used in lots of home building and other things. In the United States, it's really not driven that way. It's driven through the use of ready-mixed concrete, and I wanted to touch on that next on slide 6. So rather than a nice controlled environment, this is a factory. This is what you see when ready-mix is designed. This is one of our members, Thomas Concrete. And I'm not sure exactly which plant this is, but what you can see are the silos. Those silos hold the raw materials. What you can see in the back, kind of small there, that's sand, 89 stone, 57 stone, which is the stone size that you use mainly in most concrete mixes. And so that all of the materials go into those silos, and based upon the specifications of the job, they get weighed out, and a ready-mix truck pulls up underneath that plant And all of those materials in their specific weights and volumes get deposited into the back of that truck. And that truck drum starts spinning. You add water to it, and the manufacturing process starts for what a load of concrete is going to be. That load of concrete, a ready-mix truck has about 9 yards in it. They can hold 10 or more, but weight limitations, you normally can't go that far. The concrete's going to weigh about 36,000 pounds once it goes in. And so that's the nature of the truck. That once it's in the truck, you've got 90 minutes about in order to get it to a job site and get it down for the finishers to work it and get it into the process that it has to become the product that's going to be once that hardens and cures. And so you can imagine getting around 285 in other parts of Atlanta, your 90 minutes sounds easy, which why you'll find, and we've heard the term, it's a very local business as well in all your communities. And so if you think about that, we also talked about, concrete going into roads. And so just as an idea, so you see those mixer trucks on the road, they pull up, they fill up, they go to a job site. If you do a mile of highway, so you can look down at the slide there, you do a mile with the normal GDOT projects, that's going to be 1,000 trips of ready-mix trucks getting to that. And if you think about large warehouses, you think about large data centers, other things that have lots of flat work, there's lots and lots of truckloads. And what is really special about what our industry does, if you go to the next slide, is those 1,000 loads, and the folks at the DOT and others can attest to it, they all have to match pretty much. They have to have the same consistency, they have to have the same PSI rating, they have to have the same components in them. And so when you look at a road, you look at a flat surface like a warehouse floor, factory floor, they all have to look uniform and the same. And our industry does an amazing job of getting that right day in, day out at our producers. So if you go to slide 7, on slide 7, concrete's not a thing. Concrete is a manufactured product. And again, that manufacturing process starts at the plant, and it happens while that drum is spinning all the way to the job site. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. And so it's made of cementatious materials. I'm not a geologist or a material scientist, but all that is when you add water to that stuff, it gets really sticky. And that's the hardening mechanism. And so that's the stuff that our industry is dealing with a lot. You talk about regulations. I'm not going to get into that today. But EPDs and those other types of documents have to be filled out are becoming more and more prevalent in the jobs that we do. If you think about the carbon footprint, cement as an example, cement is a key ingredient in concrete. Cement is 8% of the world's carbon footprint, the production of cement. And so we're, as an industry, we don't manufacture that product. But we consume that product, and then we have to then carry the weight of the carbon footprint that is inherent within it. And so the other parts that go in there, there's other cementatious materials, fly ash, right? And so fly ash is a byproduct of burning coal, power plants. You also have slag. Slag is a byproduct of the manufacturing of steel. And both slag and fly ash are cementatious materials. Okay? The other one, which is clay, which is becoming more prominent and used, and there's a lot of experimentation going on in the state of Georgia below that fall line that we talked about for kaolin. And so kaolin clay, when it's baked and produced, can actually replace what cement does in total within a concrete mix. But again, I'm not a geologist, I'm not gonna get into all that for you today, but it's a very complex way in which it's done. And then, once you actually put it in the ground, or on the flat surface, or on a road base, you've got to measure it very precisely in multiple testing periods while it cures for 28 days. And at that 28th day, samples are put into a big press and they're crushed. And if it doesn't meet the PSI, you're like, well, I've already poured it in the ground, what am I going to do now? And so the precision is extremely important because Patrick's not going to, and the DOT folks aren't going to be happy if we're not meeting that PSI, nor the folks at CW Matthews and the other construction partners we work with. Is that right, Patrick? So it's got to match. So it's a complex business, and it's done by a lot of hard-working folks. So what goes into a yard of concrete? You'll hear concrete is basically discussed as a yard, and that's a cubic yard of concrete. And a cubic yard of concrete weighs 2 tons. So just think 3 by 3 by 3. Okay? It's pretty heavy once it cures. And you can see the material mixes that go into that. And then in order to get the carbon footprint down, you can use materials like fly ash and slag and metakaolin as an alternative to cement to mix it in together so you can reduce that carbon footprint a bit. And you can reduce the cost a bit, but not so much. And you can't replace all of the cement. So all of these pieces of the supply chain are what drive the cost of the business as well. And I'm not going to go through all the mixtures and the weightings, but again, 4,000 PSI mix is what you're going to need for a commercial project. And you can kind of get a feel for the amount of these materials that go into each yard. And how many yards are on a truck? 9 yards on a truck. So each truck, and that's how you get your 36,000 pounds for that type of a mix. So, hope everybody's got at least a baseline of what ready mixed concrete is. So let's talk about the Georgia marketplace. So each of the green pins on the map represent one of the 300 plus ready mix plants that are in the state of Georgia. And the red outlined areas, for the benefits of the committee members, hopefully you'll find your district in there, and you'll find out whether or not you've got a concrete plant in your district. If you don't have one in your district, that's okay, because if you can go about 20, 30 miles away, somebody's going to be able to provide concrete to folks in your district. And I'll get to that as we go a little bit further on. So if you go to slide 11, there you get a feel for kind of the concentration of where those concrete plants are in the state of Georgia. It's no surprise that you've got a pretty good concentration in the metro area. And so those weren't designed for y'all to be able to see those. Those are numbers inside there. And so Fulton County has 15 plants, right? 15 plants in Fulton County, that's one. 2 counties have 10 plants. 2 counties have 8 plants. 4 counties have 7. And you can go through the list and see where that is. Where you don't see any shading at all, that's the counties don't even have a concrete plant. And they're served by businesses that are outside of that county and perhaps outside your district. 45 counties in Georgia don't have any concrete plants at all, so that mix has to come in and get there. If you go to the next slide, slide 12, again for the benefit of the committee members, this is kind of where you can see how many plants are in your districts. And again, it's very local. And you probably haven't had any residents show up and asking, why aren't you building a concrete plant in our county? You don't get many requests for folks wanting to build those. And so they don't get constructed very often. Just for the record, to put up a brand new concrete plant, assuming you can get zoning and you can afford the land, it's going to cost about $1.5 million just to construct it. Good news is it's got a 30 to 50 year life. So it does last. It's a very, very durable asset. But you can see the mix of where it is, and we have 54 districts across the state that don't have any concrete plants there. So just for your own interest. If you go to slide 13, there are more than 40 ready-mix concrete businesses in Georgia. Okay? And how do you recognize those businesses? You just see the name on the side of the truck. You see the name on the drum typically, and that's how you'll recognize where those are. And so you can go all the way through. Some of these are large. They have, 30, 40 plants. Some, the majority have 10 to 20 plants. And then we have a lot of small local providers. There's a provider in Lee County that if you go to their website, it says, I started a concrete plant because I couldn't get concrete in Lee County. That's why he started a concrete plant. He has 6 trucks, and it's a family business now. And so it is capital intensive, but there's a good mix of these businesses around the state. One of I won't call it a challenge, it's just a dynamic of the business. And I appreciate you Baron, in showing some of the aggregate businesses that are in the state. You can see the ones that are construction aggregates, and that's a mix of sand and aggregate companies. And you see some of those independents, Stephen, that you had mentioned, that exist out there. And but there's a lot. And then we rely as an industry on those local providers and being able to get that material and to get material in the specification. So we call up a local plant's got a job they need to do, and they need 89 stone, and they call their local aggregate company, and they say, well, I don't know, we made 78 this week, so we don't have 89 right now. So getting that precision that the aggregates folks talked about is real important to us, because we need to have that size of stone based upon the type of job that we need to do with the concrete itself. So you see the cement, and then you see the fly ash, slag, and clay. And those are the other pieces that go into it. And as of right now, those are all domestically produced. Except for cement, I'll get to that. And that's, GDOT's approved, I believe, one company that allows slag import from Turkey. So there is some imports. There's definitely imports on the cement side we'll talk about. There are some of our members that are importing aggregates internationally, but I'm not going to get into that today. But there are folks that are experimenting with that, a little bit to Representative McDonald's question. So it's a very complex supply chain. It takes a lot of materials, and as Barron was saying, they come over the road. You'll see lots of concrete plants in two places. You'll see them next to a quarry. So when we got to Martin Marietta later today, there's 3 concrete plants that hang right off the edge of it. One for SRM, one for Quikrete, and then one for Thomas Concrete, because that's reducing the time it takes them to get that material. The others you'll see, very common, you'll see ready-mix plants that will be right next to a rail line. And some of those rail lines are privately owned spurs, because that's how they get all that material in. But most of it comes, like cement, ag, most of that comes into our members' plants, comes over the road. And if you see things from a tank line, like one of our members, J&M, if you see a kind of a dusty truck on the road that's got 3 compartments and it kind of dumps out at the bottom, that's probably a cement tanker, right? And you remember that Thomas plant we were looking at? That cement tanker is going to supply them for part of a day with 25,000 tons on it. So it's again, complex business, a complex supply chain, and that's a lot of the cost of what goes into getting the concrete in place. I'll touch on cement. We don't represent the cement industry, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that today, but I think it's important to point out we only have one cement factory, which is a large kiln that bakes limestone into pellets that get milled at other types of factories into a powder, and that's the powder that goes into the concrete. We have one plant in Georgia. It's owned by Cemex, and it's in Clinchfield, down south of Warner Robins. And so that manufacturing of cement is very important. The majority of it stays in Georgia. Well, approximately 90% or so stays in Georgia from sources that I spoke with. And so we have to get our cement from other places. Most of that cement comes from the surrounding states. Again, it's got to get railed in, it's got to get trucked in. And so the partners we have in the industry that you saw on the previous slide, and we'll list in a minute, are bringing those in from out of state. So 20% or so comes from Clinchfield, and then you've got 30% that we do import. Our industry imports internationally. And so you can see the countries in which those cement imports come from. Go down, I'm on slide 17. So y'all got a great representation, and I think we're, as an industry and as an association, we've gone to put a lot of work into building a great relationship with DOT. And I think my predecessor, Bill Benzer, who did a great job, has really reestablished a relationship that was rocky. Again, no more puns, but it was not good a few years ago. And but the partnership we've had, they participate in our technical meetings, and I think we're working really well together. We always don't see eye to eye on certain things, but we work well together, and I think it's a great partnership. But you saw the volume of work that we're doing, and we don't just build roads with concrete. We build commercial buildings and a lot of flat work and residential. So those are the important parts of what drives our industry, and the work that we do within GDOT is an important part of that, and you can kind of see where the concrete use is as we look at these large projects. But again, you saw a lot of that earlier today, so I'll let you use that material as that baseline. If we go to slide 19, I think Barron pegged it, 2006, 2007, the world stopped spinning in our industry and in a lot of folks. So you see the peak of the building that was going on in Georgia. I lived in Forsyth County from 1993 to 2002, And we still had some dirt roads. I don't think there are any dirt roads in Forsyth County anymore. It was amazing just coming up here and seeing what's going on in the county. We had 2 high schools back then when we moved down to Peachtree Corners. But you can see where the industry built and built and built and built, and you see that big spike. And you don't see the concrete market having a big, up and to the right trend without having the same thing happen with the aggregate, because we need the aggregates built to put it into concrete, right? So they go hand in hand. So that dropped off, and pretty precipitously. And we had a lot of folks go out of business. We had a lot of folks got acquired. And but we had a lot of folks that hung on and got through it and did what you do when you run a small business. And so that's kept us as a thriving industry. And you can see where we are in volume now. And so we're at about 10.4 million cubic yards, and in 2025, year over year, as we looked at our mid-year study, we're about 4% down year over year in the Atlanta market, and we are about 6% up in the rest of the state as far as production. So it's basically a flat year, but depending on where you are in the state, you're seeing a little bit more prosperous than others. I want to touch on next the hardworking folks that we have, for the members that I'm honored to represent in the industry. And so these are the, if you look at each of those plants we talked about, how many of them are there? Over 300, about 307. And this is a mix of national averages and ours that we keep for the GRMCA. And so we don't have exact counts from all of our members and all their employees and what they do, but we do a wage and benefit survey every year that about 75% of our members respond to anonymously. So we can understand what the pay scales are looking like. That's a big inflationary thing within our business. Cost of jobs, cost of great employees is going up. When you look at across all the different roles that are at a plant, you got the mixer drivers that got to get those trucks to and from the job sites, batch operators, plant maintenance, fleet maintenance, dispatchers, which are folks that make sure orders get processed and out the door. You can combine all of that, and you can kind of get a feel for what the industry generates as far as income for employees across the state. And so each plant's going to have about $1.4 million a year, and we have about 5,000 to 6,000 employees statewide within the ready-mix business itself. On slide 21, now the economic contribution. And so we have very clear antitrust rules within the ready-mix concrete industry. We don't talk price, we don't talk costs. When we get together as a group, it's very but national averages tell us that a yard of concrete that we started talking about when I began, that 4,000-pound 3x3 block, that yard is going to sell for somewhere between $160 and $180. And again, that cost has gone up as well, and that's what goes into the costs that we have, that processes that we're talking about with transportation and the GDOT today. And so that also creates a tax base. Those aren't all tax-free jobs that we're doing. And so there's also tax revenue that we're generating off of that. So all said and done, let's just say you're a highly successful ready-mix company in Georgia. You do everything right. You treat your employees. You don't have a lot of turnover. You're getting to and from the job sites. You're growing. You're buying all those materials in the supply chain. You're selling it at that price point we talked about. If you operate an extremely good business, you're going to make 3 to 5% margin. So that's the tightness of the business that our members operate within. They do a fabulous job every day. I don't see any houses falling down. I don't see any roads and bridges that aren't supported well. And so they do a great job. And we appreciate everything they do and all the support from the communities that they're in. I'll go to slide 23, and that's my wrapping slide. We really appreciate the work that we've done through Emily and Tucker and others to get some legislation that's important for our industry. I just wanted to call out 2 pieces of legislation that are in the books now, and that legislation is House Bill 279, and that was to give insurance breaks to homeowners, anyone who's a policyholder rather, for building building with fortified construction. Mainly that's concrete, and so that was really supportive of the homeowners to make sure we're still building and building a lot with concrete. And then the other one that's really important, we talked about, remember how concrete's manufactured? It's not manufactured in a plant. It's distributed in a plant into a truck. And that truck manufactures it while it's in transit to the job site. And so really it's on the road manufacturing. And so through a lot of work, again, Emily Tucker and others, we had a bill passed, House Bill 153, which provides for a tax credit on the costs of the maintenance and the parts you need to have to operate that mixer truck. A mixer drum on a mixer truck lasts 3 years. We heard that granite's a pretty harsh product, and it kind of beats that truck drum up a lot as it's spinning. And so you got to replace those drums about every 3 to 5 years. Life of a truck is 5 to 7 years typically. A new mixer truck doesn't cost what it cost in 2019 rather. New mixer truck's going to cost you about $250,000 just to get a feel for the economics of it. And so around the state we have over 2,500 trucks. And so again, a lot of that economic impact we have on our business comes from just the way in which they have to get the materials and then operate those fixed assets. Chairman Jaspers, the committee, that's what I had to share with you all today. I hope you found it informative, and I hope you all take away and tell the family tonight that you know that cement is not concrete. And that's what I want to make sure I
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, I just have one question. Because I think underlying this whole committee meeting is cost, and I guess the biggest cost driver in concrete production is cement. Is it subject to tariff? I mean, the imported. I guess that's not your world exactly, but I didn't know if there's a cement association.
Yeah, there is a cement association. I'll leave it to them to answer that, but there are going to be tariffs on those products, and just I don't know if the tariffs went into effect on Wednesday. You can't keep up with them anymore, but there was supposed to be a 50% tariff on Canadian cement that was supposed to have hit on Wednesday, and I probably should have had that for the meeting today. But cement is a big part of the cost, and then the other aggregates, construction aggregates, are a part of that as well.
Well, good deal. Any other members have? Chairman Parsons?
Okay, I think I'm on. This one thing just kind of caught my interest here. This percentage of slag that's used in it.
Yes, sir.
I've been familiar with coal slag. First of all, I didn't know that slag was used in concrete, and I didn't know that it was that big a percentage, 30 to 50%, according to your slide number 7 here.
Yes, sir. If I could, Representative, that is if you do a yard of concrete, that's the maximum allowed percentage of the cementatious materials that can go into a yard of concrete to be allowed for specifications.
Okay. Well, I guess my question is, obviously, there is no, apparently there's no shortage of any of the products that go into concrete. As much of it's produced, which is good. I like concrete. I poured a patio one time. It was the worst looking patio anybody's ever had in their life, but I did do it. But on this slag, I'm just wondering, like I say, I knew that there was coal slag. I didn't know this apparently is a byproduct of producing iron, or steel. Rather, steel.
Yeah. Which we don't do a whole lot of in the U.S. anymore. So most of that slag, a lot of the slag's imported.
That's what
across the United States.
Another slide said that GDOT had approved slag from Turkey.
That's one approved source, yes.
Okay, so that's, I guess that kind of goes to my question. Apparently there's no shortage of any of these things, but I remember it's been a long time ago. I think it was during the time of the oil embargo back in the 70s, when it seemed like we were running out of everything. But I had read and I was still a young guy back then, but I read a news article in the paper there was I can't remember what it was, but there was some huge project someplace in the world. I can't think where it was at. And it obviously must not have been true, but it said that project was going to take 80 or 85% of the world's supply of concrete. But we're still producing concrete, so that wasn't true, and that was years ago. Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there any, especially with this slag, is there any, is that something that you foresee as being available for the long period of time? That's my question.
Well, thank you for that, Representative. I think one thing, and not to correct you at all, but though we do have fairly vibrant supply chain right now of these materials. It's not always true.
Okay.
Cement was rationed, basically. It's called allocated. Cement was allocated during heavy construction periods when you just can't get it and get enough of it produced. So there are times where there is enough demand on the concrete construction needs, is that you don't always have all of the cement that you need. And that's why a lot of producers, they seek out fly ash, which also occasionally, we have 3 coal burning plants, I believe, still in Georgia, and there's enough slag in those in the ponds, the reclamation ponds, that's going to be available for a couple decades. So there's still fly ash out there.
Okay.
And then slag is a little bit harder to get. And so yes, those there are shortages from time to time, and based upon that demand. And so, but again, you can only put so much fly ash in. If you don't have, in that example, and so again, the engineers at GDOT and others can say, based upon the design that they want the concrete to be to meet the performance standards of the job, you might not be able to put all the fly ash you'd like to put into it because you just can't meet those standards. So it's not always a one-for-one substitute that you can do. So there's lots to the science of the technical teams within our members on the how they design those mixes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Chairman Parsons, I was watching Patrick during the call you out. Patrick shaking his head. He's thinking, I see you rubbing your chin. Because I know y'all work very closely with everybody on product and what will work and what won't. Well, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the time.
The next up, where's Dan? Coming down on the side. Dan, thank you for coming representing our highway contractors. Your company is one of those that I follow on Facebook. Your folks
Thank
tell
you.
what you're doing.
See, everybody's leaving when the contractor gets up here.
No.
My name is Dan Garcia. Thanks for having me. My day-to-day is role as president of C.W. Matthews Contracting, but today I'm here on behalf of the Georgia Highway Contractors Association. I just assumed the role of chair there for a couple of years, so I thank David for all he does for the industry. If you want to know about the Georgia Highway Contractors Association, we basically represent every contractor that does work for the department or other public agencies, everything from asphalt construction, bridges, grading, concrete paving. So in essence, all the contractors in the state that do mainly horizontal construction, highway construction, road construction, are part of the Georgia Highway. So with that, I have a few slides. It's like 67 of them, so this should go real quick now. I just have 4. I promise you that I'm going to be. I really just want to spend time, kind of from a contractor's perspective, just talking about the process that we do to bid a project and the factors that go into it. And of course, I know many of you are familiar with what we do in our industry, but I'll touch on that.
While we're waiting, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Where'd you go to college?
Best institution in America, the Citadel. I know you're fond of it. It's the first time I've seen you in a while without a Citadel shirt on.
While we're waiting, Dan, tell us a little bit about C.W. Matthews while they're getting you up.
Sure. So this is our 80th year. We have 1,900 employees, mainly in Georgia. We have some operations in Jacksonville, Florida, but family-owned business. Asphalt's our prime work that we do, but really in the last several years we've grown to be a large bridge contractor in the state. We do grading. We recently moved to Savannah, doing work there, large design build jobs. Mostly our work is bid build, which I'll touch on in a minute, low bid environment. Do a lot of work mainly for public agencies like GDOT. GDOT's our largest customer. And we do sell a lot of asphalt for companies that do private work that would do the normal paving from a driveway all the way to a Walmart. Yes, sir. Okay, with that, we'll, again, just wanted to really just quickly touch on the procurement basis, kind of timeline for a contractor. Again, many of you already might know this information, so really any questions that you have, I'd love to answer those. But the timeline on a bid is very short. As a matter of fact, the GDOT letting is today, but you normally have 4 weeks from the time that a contractor sees a set of plan and specifications to the time that you submit price to Georgia DOT. So it's a very short period of time to put all that together. Always praise our estimating team because we're engineers and the DOT obviously start years and years ahead of the day that the plans fall in your hand, whether it's right-of-way acquisition or design and so forth. The contractor normally has 4 weeks to try to put the pricing together to submit that. So in that period of time, obviously, you also have to assess risk, and that obviously impacts the pricing that we do. And some of those risks can be soil conditions, whether the project is sandy material in the coast or does the project have rock that we're going to have to deal with. Of course, utilities, and I know there's another group kind of examining that, but how are utilities going to impact the project? Whether if you're building a project through the middle of the woods that doesn't have a lot of utilities versus a project where you're doing some widening and you have to wait for the utilities to be relocated before you can even begin work. And schedule's a big impact for us. The longer the job, that's been mentioned a couple of times today. The longer the job, normally the higher the cost because you're anticipating prices and taking the risk on a lot of these elements that are really at times under our control, at times not under our control. There is some index from the department, mainly asphalt index, so as prices of asphalt go up and down, we are able to do that and don't have really much of a risk on that, especially on projects over a year. Resurfacing projects do not have an index, but they're less than a year work construction jobs, or most of them are over a year, and the AC or asphalt cement that goes in the asphalt is indexed, but really there are no other indexes that we deal with. And then finally, we're in a low bid environment. As the chief engineer said, the number of bidders is greater today than it was a few years ago, and the only way we pick up work is by being the low bidder, with a very few exceptions. There's some design build work that has a technical component, but for the most part, I would say 95% of the work is under a low bid environment. Just the pricing components that go in, again, this might be basic for some of you, but just what affects the prices for us as we put a bid together, or what components are part of the bid. That would be labor rates, equipment, obviously that would be the machinery that it takes for us to do the work. The haul component, whether that's from the quarries to the site, we do the haul. We have a lot of subcontractors that do the haul, but the haul from the quarry to the site, from the asphalt plant to the site, moving dirt within a project or from a borrow pit. And then materials, many of the materials that everybody's discussed today, and then subcontractors, which that could be whatever. It could be pavement markings, it could be guardrail, a few things that we would not self-perform, that we go out to the market. Grassing, for example, is one of those. And then under the materials, most, the main materials that we utilize is aggregate, again, liquid asphalt, concrete, and steel. So I put a note here so you can kind of get an idea of how much the material component is for us on a project. So on the asphalt resurfacing work that we talked about, so materials are 46 to 59% of the price. And then on construction projects, that can be 30 to 43%. So as you can see on a resurfacing job, the greatest portion is basically aggregate, which can be basically 95% of the mixture, or 94%, and then liquid asphalt, which is around 5%. Of course, one of the ways, aggregate guys don't love it, but it's part of being a low bidder is we utilize RAB, which is recycled asphalt. It's aggregate and asphalt that had been utilized prior on a project that we mill up from a road. So if you see a big machine taking up a road, that's brought up back to the asphalt plant, and we utilize that in addition to the aggregate, and then, like I said, mainly 5% or so of liquid asphalt. And then construction projects, it is going to be the same. Aggregate would be a substantial portion, but you're also going to then get into concrete, bridge beams, a lot of other materials in addition to the aggregates. Other things that impact the pricing, I just mentioned it, utilities and anything that would extend the life of the project. So if we're bidding a project today that it's a construction job, the completion date could be 3, 4, 5 years from now. So that's going to be different than a project that has a 6-month completion date. Again, resurfacing has to be normally done within 11 months of the bid date. But on construction projects, it is common to see projects go 3, 4, 5 years. Fuel, of course, no index there. As y'all can see right now with everything that's going on in the world, when fuel goes up, then, you know, obviously that's an impact to the contractor. We try to either buy some fuel hedges to try to protect some of that. Sometimes that works our way. Sometimes it, excuse me, it doesn't. But there's really not a lot of protection there. It's kind of a risk that we take as we bid a project. And as you can imagine, trying to figure out where fuel's going to be, for example, 3 years from now, is very difficult to do. And then another item that really impacts us, and just grateful for what was done last year on the tort reform, but it's insurance costs, whether that's insurance costs for the haulers, which in some cases have doubled over the last few years, or insurance costs that obviously you know, include general liability, workman's comp, and all those things that impact all businesses, but definitely impact us. And obviously, when you're paving 2 feet away from vehicles that are going next to you 60 or 70 miles, you can imagine how much insurance companies like that. So finally, I'll just close with this. We've heard a lot about different materials and all that. You know, the chief engineer and the group from the DOT, which, by the way, I know we work for them, and they're a great owner. That we have, and you know this, we have the best GDOT that we've ever had. So there's a great partnership there. Our fear, and that was mentioned by them, is that there's less work out there as costs go up. So we know it's needed. We're trying to bring businesses in, and what was done several years back with HB 170 was incredible. But as less tons in the market, less construction in the market, yes, it brings more competition because there's less to go around, but it'll also paralyze the state if we don't continue to invest there. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Dan, I just have one. Back to indexing, you know, I've never really delved into that. You know, Josh, you hadn't explained all this to me. But now the project's less than a year, no indexing.
Yes.
So I guess on these long projects, like you said, like we're going to look at next week on utility right of way and extending some of these projects way past what we feel the normal construction date on, like stone and cement and steel. How do you, are those all those subject to indexing?
No, sir. Only one is liquid asphalt. So liquid asphalt, like I said, goes up and down. If you look at the AC index, which anybody can pull up, those costs fluctuate, and they are indexed, so they provide the contractor protection. Honestly, on less than a year, it's just really a little bit of a gamble. Some contractors have tanks where you can store liquid for some period of time. It's one of the investments that some of the contractors like us have done to mitigate that risk, because again, once you turn in the bid, that's the cost. But again, the DOT has indexed liquid because it's hard to figure out where liquid's gonna be, 2, 3, 4 years from now. On the others, we just work with suppliers, us and everybody in the industry, to basically obtain pricing. And most of the time, it can be done two ways. Some suppliers give you a price for the duration of the project, which obviously takes some risk away from the contractor. It might put some risk on them. Some suppliers basically give you a price for today, and they tell you what those escalators are gonna be for every year. So then you obviously have to make sure that you know when you're gonna do the work, so that you can price it accordingly. But from a DOT standpoint, they're basically seeing that as the price of performing the work, which seems to be fair. There's a lot of indexes, like they were covered, the CPI. You can throw a million indices. A lot of times they don't relate. It could be a different index in one state versus another. It depends on suppliers, number of suppliers. As you heard, there's only one cement plant. There's only, I believe, one in Savannah, maybe two beams manufacturers in Georgia. So for the most part, we work with them to try to basically lock in the price for the duration of the project. But they're obviously, if we're not taking the risk, then they're taking the risk depending on the number of years.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Representative Lynn, yeah.
I have two questions. One is, as you've already attested to and GDOT attested to, we have seen an increase in the number of bidders per project in the last 4 years. I believe an increase of one per project, which is huge when you put that out. What do you think accounts for that, and how can we continue to encourage that, is the first question. And the second question is, in a low bid environment, as I understand it, that can decrease costs on the front end, but I'm sure cost overruns are a thing. How are you all quantifying that in the low bid environment, the cost to your contractors, and how that may be impacting who can bid on what, and how it's impacting in general your industry?
You're asking me or Josh?
Specifically you.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to, their answer, obviously they want as many bidders as they can, obviously, because it is a low bid environment. I think, not speaking for them, but I think what you have there is one of the things right now why there might be more bidders now than they were at one time is, for example, the private side, housing and some of the, and I'll give you an example of an asphalt paving job. There might be contractors that were doing more of that work in the private sector, that as that work slows down, they might enter the public sector. That could be one thing. There's people entering and exiting constantly. So in a low bid environment, obviously, if somebody comes in that doesn't have a lot of experience, their requirement is obviously they got to be able to bond the project to protect the owner in case they don't perform. But it takes them some time to try to figure out what it costs to put a ton of asphalt down or that sort of thing. Again, from a taxpayer standpoint, is great, the more bidders you have. On the other hand, at times you might get a contractor that's better than the other. They might not be able to get the work based on their cost structure and so forth. So does that answer your question? I think the other issue you have, again, is that there's less number of projects. So you also have, say it's we've seen large bids lately go 8, 10, 12 contractors. So as the volume of projects goes down because pricing of materials and labor and fuel has gone up, like the DOT mentioned earlier, less projects, so there's less work to be spread out. And then it seems unreasonable to have more contractors if there's less work, but that's what we're seeing right now.
And a quick follow-up, because you mentioned bond requirements, and through my nonprofit, we don't do construction work in transportation, but we do is in housing. So I know how that impacts some folks. So not even specific to bond requirements, but how would your members say that we can appropriately further ease the environment to enter and continue and succeed in terms of regulation?
I think honestly there's a good partnership there. I don't see a lot of roadblocks. The roadblocks are really more for the department on regulations and so forth to get a project to bid. That period of time that it takes, you know, with right-of-way acquisitions, environmental process that they have to go through. A lot of these projects get designed years and years ago, and now we're seeing the fruits of that. But from a contractor, I mean, really, if you can bond a job, obviously you got to meet their specs and make sure you're giving a quality product and all those things that go as far as meeting their specifications. But the process in general to be able to bid a job for the department is not very difficult.
Thank you, Dan.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate what y'all do all across our state. Last up, Joe with Georgia Transportation Alliance.
Thank you, Chairman
Yes, sir.
Jaspers and committee members for the opportunity to provide a few remarks today. As the chairman mentioned, Joseph Santoro, Executive Director with the Georgia Transportation Alliance. And as they're kind of pulling up my slide here, I can kind of just go ahead and get started. I know I stand between y'all, a tour, and the rest of your Friday and weekend, so I'll be brief here. But just really wanted to touch on a few things today and a little bit of overview about GTA for those that may not be as tuned in through the work that we do. We recently completed earlier this year an economic impact study, really looking at the economic benefits of investing in transportation, and so we'll talk a little bit through that. So we're on slide 2 right now. We'll talk through a little bit of the growth in our transportation system as we look at the next 20 to 25 plus years by 2050 of what that's going to look like on our transportation system. And then just briefly touch on some of the transportation investment insights. I think we talked a little bit about some of that today. So I did want to start, and I always think it's important to start with the mission statement. And so we're focused on identifying and promoting long-term sustainable solutions or transportation solutions connected to economic development and job creation. And as we kind of dive a little bit more into the organization, just briefly mention we are a separate 501c4 organization structured very similarly to a chamber, nonprofit association with an executive committee and board of directors. I'll talk more about that in just a second here. We are a closely aligned affiliate and transportation arm of the Georgia State Chamber of Commerce. And as I mentioned, we represent and work closely with our members across the transportation industry. I won't list all of them out today. I know we're trying to get out of here in just a few minutes, but just wanted to showcase the makeup of our group and the impact that we have across the state. Just from a focusing and policy perspective, we are focused on heavy road and bridge investment, freight and logistics investment, and then public infrastructure investment as well. And just as we conduct our work, we work, with chairman, we work down at the Capitol on the policy development piece, but we also do a lot of research, data forecasting, working with our partners and consultants, as well as on the advocacy piece. So I'm kind of transitioning to slide 5 here. You can kind of see our board of directors here that kind of make up the rest of our board. So we'll just quickly move along here. So just kind of diving right into the economic impact study and some of those results, we really wanted to look at the last decade or so of how transportation investment has really been tied to both economic output as well as jobs created over that time span. And I think we all know Georgia's transportation network connects businesses to customers, workers to jobs, farms to manufacturers, farms and manufacturers to local and global markets. And over the last decade, we've seen those major improvements in transportation infrastructure leading to improved safety, mobility, and system productivity. And I think this is evident that, if you look through the full report, you can see that between manufacturing, distribution, food and agriculture industries account for 90% of the freight totals by volume as we're seeing those increase throughout the state. And just briefly just mention on on some of those investment pieces that the legislature put in place over a decade ago. In 2010, right, we had the Transportation Investment Act, which allowed voters the opportunity to approve a regional 1% sales tax dedicated to transportation improvements. I think we talked a little bit about the 2015 House Bill 170, so I won't dive into that, but that did allow another additional $1 billion dedicated to transportation each year. And over the last couple of years, right, we've seen these one-time surplus payments by Governor Kemp, which was really, as Meg pointed out, really kept us above that inflationary and cost of construction line. So very thankful for the leadership, both from the governor as well as the General Assembly, of moving those dollars forward. So just as a kind of a takeaway here on this slide, just want to mention that Georgia has been, sent a signal to the marketplace that transportation system, a strong transportation system boosts Georgia's competitiveness, increases jobs, brings businesses, and expands businesses here in the state. And you can kind of see both the increase there being, both a pro-business state, but also making sure we're investing in our assets. So just really the high level, as we think about economic impact studies. This is kind of the high level messaging piece I wanted to leave with some of the committee members today, but it is estimated that every dollar that's invested in transportation, the economic yield or economic return is $2.20. And I would say as it relates to the return, it's greater than it ever has been. There was a similar study, we didn't conduct it, but it was back in 2018. That was $1.85. So you can kind of see that growth and that economic return is there as we're talking future growth and what our transportation investment needs are going to be in the future. So just briefly, I know affordability has been a topic, both the national, state, and local levels. And so really we dived into what does $2.20 mean for a Georgia family, Georgia household, and for the state here in Georgia. So you can kind of see on the slide there, and so this is slide 8. Sorry, I don't think they're numbered. Apologies there. But $1.8 billion in additional income each year, roughly 1,600 new jobs, and really looking at the rate of job increases also as a component of that. About $1,000 saved per household each year, and about $4.4 billion in delays, in reduced traffic delays. So you can kind of see from that perspective, and happy to share kind of offline any more details on methodology and kind of what was used there. So just moving along. I did want to mention a little bit on the job growth side. So as we looked at, we picked a few, as we conducted this report, we looked at a few benchmark states that I would say have a very similar transportation assets that Georgia has, and really used both Texas, Tennessee, and South Carolina as our benchmarks. And just mention on average, about 250,000 jobs in trucking, warehousing, distribution, and logistics services throughout the state. From 2019 to 2024, you can see there our growth is just a little bit higher than our kind of neighboring states, which is, I think good to see, and really I think speaks to the investments that we've been putting into the system over the last decade, as we talked about. And as you can kind of see on the left-hand side of the screen, right, as it relates to all other industries, we see that freight and logistics job growth really has been that significant compared to every other industry. And just the main takeaway here is 1 in 5 jobs in Georgia rely on trade, transportation, utility. Another 1 in 8, or 13%, are in freight-intensive industries. That's the main takeaway. 1 in 3 jobs in Georgia depend on our ability to move freight and move goods throughout the state efficiently and safely. And a little bit on the GDP or our economic output. I won't read all these numbers off, but you can kind of see how we compare to those same benchmark states. We're leading the pack, but they're closely approaching, and you can kind of see which specific areas are investing. And sorry, make sure I got the right slide here. So it's page 10 or slide 10, and just wanted to mention a few things. As we look at the freight and logistics economic output of $25 billion or so, we did pull a number on the concrete and aggregate, because I know we're talking a lot about that today. That's about a $2 billion for those two specific industries, kind of that economic output into the economy here in Georgia. So moving along, I want to talk a little bit about what is Georgia going to look like in 2050. And I know GDOT and the Director of Planning does a lot of looking into this, of what investments and in projects we need to be looking at into the future. As we know, growth is here, it's coming, and it's going to continue to be moving. And so as we look at population, we know population is going to grow about 2 million residents over the next 20 years. Jobs about the same, about 2 million. Our port container capacity is going to nearly double, as well as the freight tonnage that we're moving throughout the state. And the number of truck trips, about the same, going to be doubling. So if we think traffic, congestion, is bad now, if we do nothing, it will be a lot worse, let me tell you. So yeah, message there, more growth means more freight and more traffic, putting additional strain on our system. So I did want to mention, one of our national partners, the American Transportation Research Institute, does an annual report every year where they look at the top 100 freight truck bottlenecks in the U.S. So Georgia has 9 out of the top 100. 4 of those are in the top 10. And I know Meg and Commissioner McMurray will tell you that's a list we don't want to be on. And a lot of the strategic and smart investments that the GDOT is putting forward are addressing these issues. And I live in between number 5 and number 6. And so, I see it every day. And I also see the work that's being done to address those issues. And so all I'd say is, I think this really speaks to the growth that we're experiencing. It's here, and we need to make sure that we're funding at the levels we need to be doing to address that. And we'll talk about that here on the next slide, which is keeping up with growth. I think if we look at the need, what is the total need, additional need over the next 20 to 25 years, right? It's going to be about 80 to 90 billion, right? That's a lot, right? And as we look at congestion costs and delay costs, right, that's about 15 million per day. I think talking a little bit earlier on some of the GDOT funding and how, that's moving and these surplus payments have kept us forward. But we don't know where the economy is going to be in the future, right? And we don't know where those surplus dollars may be moved to or used for, right? And so I think we need to make sure we're looking at our revenue streams and making sure those are sustainable and dedicated. And, as we kind of think about that a little bit, there's a lot of options out there. We've been doing a lot of research and looking into those, and whether that's a new fee or tax, which I know can be challenging, or whether we look at redirecting some current fees that have a direct impact on our freight network. We're looking into all those opportunities and really working with Rick and the legislature and all of y'all to, what can we get done to make this and find a solution to the needs that are out there. So just kind of ending with, Georgia's success today cannot be maintained without proactive investment. So with that, I try to be as brief as I could, Chairman. I know y'all are trying to get over your tour here, but happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
It does have one statement. Committee members, if you do one thing next week or Monday or Tuesday, I hope you take time to look at this presentation. Joe went through it very quickly. He's available to talk to you about it. That one page right there, $90 billion. That's our future investment that we have to make. It's going to be our responsibility to come up with a way to do that. I mean, it's not going to, if you look at the numbers that Meg showed earlier, it's not growing. We've got to find a way to do this. And so it's going to be a challenge for us, our committee, and our legislature and the state to find ways to do that. But Joe, thank you for your leadership in doing that. In closing, just real quick, this is just the start of a conversation. I mean, just on cost. And we're going to expect there'll be questions from the committee, and we probably brought some up from you guys that we hope that you take time to get back with us and say, Rick, y'all said this is what we think, or this is something you need to look at. I hope you do that with any of our members, because that's what this is for, is to get us to learn. And we look forward to our next meeting in Savannah. Poor Miss Danny's trying to tack us down on that one right now, and we're working to get that program set up. We look forward to seeing some of y'all back next Thursday when we talk about right-of-way and utilities. CW mentioned it. It's going to be something we really need to work on. Very glad the utilities have been working on that right now. Okay, and members, thank Terry Matthews way in the back with, he represents Martin Marietta and Travis. We'll have lunch for us. The address for the meeting, it's at the bottom of the program. Danny had to show me that. And we'll meet there. And if you're not going to go, members, let us know, so we're not looking for you. And we're trying to get on this tour. And just lastly, I hope you take time to communicate with us. Like I said at the very beginning of this, we need to know what you're thinking and what we can do better in this. But with that, any other members have any comments? None. You do?
Well,
We'll punch your button. You got it.
I've got the agenda. We've set it for
We
next.
almost have said it.
Almost have said it.
Yeah, we almost have.
Almost have said it. So if you have any questions or about the next meeting?
Yep. Appreciate it. Our meeting's adjourned. Thank you.